This is Bill Carroll of Zenny62 Media with my series that'll be dealing with the off seasons and possible draft targets of NFL teams. And I'm turning now to the NFC North. And at the request of Hostin Carson Jr., we're going to start with his beloved Bears. As mentioned earlier, the Bears are in a, whether they use the term rebuild or not, they are resetting, if you prefer that. And I'm going to give you a comforting haiku to hold on to throughout this season if you're a Bears fan. Bears becoming fast, the Bears are becoming cheap, and much more, or very more something. It doesn't translate from the Japanese as well as I hoped it would, but very more athletic. Or more athletically good, maybe. 575 is harder to pull off than I thought it would be. But hold on to that. Your team is going to become cheaper, more athletic, and younger. And that is not by accident. As you've already seen, Ryan Poles, the 36-year-old African-American GM of the team, has put his stamp on what his plan is. He's clearly planning to get out from under the big contracts that they had. And already one is gone and a few others will be going. This team will look very different in a couple of years. And they will have, and here's the thing that should make you feel better. I should try to work this into a haiku. You will have $121 million in cap space, less than 1 year from today's date, to work with. They will be active in free agency, and you will be drafting. And of course, every team is looking to improve via the draft. So some of the things about what I believe your new young GM wants. You have Matt Eberflus, obviously your head coach. Ryan Poles, who is now going to be has taken over, and like I said, has told you what he wants to do. And he said his one goal is divisional dominance. Now, to use a phrase that my great-grandmother used to use, that means first squatting to rise, right? So in order to get up, you got to first get down. He's, a Canandaigua, New York native. I remember as a player at Boston College, where he was a good offensive lineman, was briefly a practice squad player as an undrafted on the Bears many years ago, right? Back in 2008, which isn't that long ago to me. But, he was a graduate assistant at Boston College, then became a scouting assistant for the Chiefs, and then worked his way up through that organization. Eventually became the chief scouting coordinator from 2010 to 2015. From 2016 to 2018, he was director of college scouting, and a really good one because look back at those Chiefs drafts from 2016 to 2018 if you doubt me. And then eventually became the assistant director of player personnel from 2019 2020. And then, of course, now is Bears general manager since the 25th of January of this past year. They're going to build through the draft. They want to get fast, physical, and young. How do I know this? Well, he said it. He literally said those things amongst the first words out of his mouth. And he didn't say cheap, but I promise you that's part of what he's thinking. This is a team that, frankly, had siloed a little too much of its cap into just a handful of players, and now he wants to spread it more, be more diffuse, with more of the money spread amongst, a larger number of players, younger players, and also he does want to, like I said, be a little active in free agency. So let me just hit you with the Bears draft and some players that the Bears could and I think should be considering. They're going to want to obviously pick up someone who can rush the passer at some point. And there's a few players that I think fit based on what I know about Coach Eberflus and, coming over obviously from, his time with the Colts. If somehow Arnold Ibikiti, the Temple by way of Penn State, graduate of Temple who spent his last year at Penn State, if he's available there, once again, it's a run, don't walk. Right? I feel like you have to move immediately to do that. If for some reason not there, you might want to consider, one of the corners or safeties. If somehow Brisker is there, I think he has to be the pick. Then if neither of those two are there, if say one of the top corners slides to you, Booth won't do that, but maybe Kyer Elam might, unlikely, but stranger things have happened. Looking at pick 71, I would look to improve the offensive line. I would consider people like Chris Paul, Zach Tom. Chris Paul is a guard from Tulsa. Zach Tom is a very good tackle who's, I think, been rising, not precipitously. I think the NFL was always higher on him than, sort of the fan base and the media was. I think what you hear as someone's rising is just the media catching up to what the NFL already thought. I think the NFL always had him as a second, third round draft pick, and now it's getting out to the media. Zachary Tom gives you that inexpensive, athletic player that could become your long-term answer at left tackle, allowing you to, move some other players around. Then at pick 147, there's some players that I truly like. And if you didn't get a corner earlier, I would run, once again, as I said before, not walk, to get Damari Mathis. He's one of my favorite mid-round players, regardless of position, that'll be available somewhere in this draft. He may not make it to here. You may even need to trade up to get him. But I feel like if you get a guy like Damari Mathis, we don't use the term tone setter about mid-round cornerbacks all that often, but this is one of the guys you should use it about. He's, feisty and tough and smart and an explosive athlete. I'm a huge fan, and if somehow he makes it there, you have to go after him. If he's not, Jacoby Durant is a pretty good consolation prize. In fact, he's not even a consolation prize. He's a terrific player. So those are guys I would consider around that point. Then I'd probably swing back over to look at both defensive interior, and then offensive line. You have another pick right there at 149, and players that should be available or could be available right around there that I like would include, amongst others, say a player like, it's possible, not likely, but possible you'd have a chance at a few guys that I really like. So depending upon who's gone before, and like I said, there's going to be a run on some positions, and then some positions will slide. Happens every year. If you didn't get a safety earlier, I consider people like Marquise Bell from Florida A&M, who I think is a terrific football player. I would also look at pass rushers like Michael Clemens from Texas A&M. And if you're looking at a pass rusher even earlier than that, there's guys I would consider even a little bit earlier. Isaiah Thomas from Oklahoma. Obviously, with that first pick, pick 39, if Nick Benito is there, that's another player that you certainly could consider at pick 39. And then moving on, I would take a long, hard look if we still, we're looking at guys like D'Angelo Malone is another player I really, really like. He should be available. Well, he shouldn't be available. He probably will be available this late. I don't understand why people have a fourth or fifth round grade on him. I would take him in the third and be thrilled. Then looking at pick 184 in the sixth, players that I would consider would include people such as, I'm going to go kick back into the interior of the offensive line. I think that if there's a player like Thayer Munford there, I would consider him. Donovan West from Arizona State's a player I would consider if he made it there. Some of these guys will be gone, but not all of them. Keelan Deitch, tackle from Arizona State, if he makes it there. Josh Izuudu, right, the other West African offensive lineman from the state of North Carolina. This one from University of North Carolina, obviously not quite the prospect that Ike Mugwanu is, but a really good player. Also, I consider Marcus McKeithen, his teammate from University of North Carolina with that last pick. And thinking about the interior of the defensive line, and this player makes it there. This is the player I'd want the most of the guys I've talked about. If Eric Johnson from Missouri State, is he raw? Yes. Does he need work on some certain things? Yes. Is he an older prospect? Yes. That's why he's probably still available. But my gosh, all the things that you used to get from Akeem Hicks, you can get some of those same things, many of those same things from a guy like Eric Johnson. Those are players I would certainly target. Obviously, going 5-12, 6-11 is normally a bad year, considered a failure in many cases. In this particular case for the Bears, it's sort of a target. You don't want to win. I mean, you do want to win, but if you win, 8 games and just miss the playoffs, what has that really done for you? It's just pushed you down the draft board. If you end up with a team with 4 or 5 wins and now set up to really load up for the next year, that's essentially what you want, even if you don't admit it.